What up, guys? Out here at the Dimensions of Disclosure Conference in Loveland, Colorado right now. You see a beautiful view, and this is why I haven't really been posting too much on YouTube the past couple days, but don't worry, give it a couple more days, I'll get back to the regular routine. Still wanted to check in here and give you guys a video, and the topic of this video is going to be on the most optimal timeline. You see, this morning during my workshop, and my workshop was a hike. You know, I didn't want to sit in a stuffy room talking to people. I was like, hey, why not just do a hike? And that'll be my workshop. And it was fantastic. And we had some great conversations during the walk. And one of those conversations was on the idea of the most optimal timeline. Now, if you're asking yourself, well, what exactly does that mean? It is a idea mainly in the spiritual communities, people who understand the idea of the co-creative consciousness. And what the thought of manifesting that optimal timeline means is basically when you are visualizing, using your co-creative consciousness to try to manifest the best timeline, the best future for yourself. Now, if you get multiple people together and all of their thoughts linked up, all of their co-creative consciousnesses in sync, well, they have a much greater capacity to manifest a optimal timeline for everybody involved. So that's the idea of what co-creating the most optimal timeline is. But during this conversation, it got the wheels turning in my head, right? And I was asking myself, what does the most optimal timeline exactly mean? And the reason I say that is because I usually find that when people are talking about manifesting the most optimal timeline, what they're talking about is manifesting the timeline, manifesting a future from now till, you know, some point ahead of ourselves that is the easiest, right? That makes them the happiest. They want to manifest that timeline for themselves that's the smoothest ride, okay? Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's good to want things to be easy, to get through these very turbulent times we are in smoothly. But what you gotta understand is, and I'm gonna drop an old adage here that I love, smooth seas never made a skilled sailor, right? And what I brought up in that conversation earlier was the fact that sometimes on that most optimal timeline, it's gonna get rough. It's gonna get rough and tough and be full of challenges. Now, if your ego is doing your thinking for you, you might say to yourself, that's not the most optimal timeline because it's tough and it sucks and I don't want to deal with that, right? Well, here's the thing. Challenge is the only thing that stimulates growth, okay? With a most optimal timeline, do you want that timeline to make you into somebody who is skillful and conscious and aware and is a very high-performing human? Or do you want that timeline to make you into somebody who is along for the easy ride, right? Who just wants things done for themselves, doesn't want to have the skills to be able to do them or do it for yourself. You see what I'm saying? So when thinking of that most optimal timeline, think of something that's, yeah, going to get maybe all of us free, get these powers that be, you know, done for, but a timeline that's going to stimulate us to grow. And don't always think, maybe you're in a tough situation right now, right? And it doesn't seem like it's the most optimal timeline for you, but later on in the future, you might look back at these challenges you're facing right now and realize like, oh my God, that's exactly what I needed at that point in time to grow. The example I used this morning in the conversation was being in a relationship with somebody. Something that everybody can relate to. Maybe you're in a relationship that really sucks, and at this particular point, you know, you think like, oh, this is definitely not what I want for myself in my life. For example, 3 years ago, myself, I was in a pretty shitty relationship, you know, 2-3 years ago, and it was not fun. Now, I got out of that relationship, and during those times, I was like, man, this is like not the, you know, quote, most optimal timeline for myself that I wanted. But here's the thing. If I never would have went through that, if that relationship never ended, right, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be doing this YouTube thing. I wouldn't be talking to thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people and doing what I do now. So looking back, I was creating the most optimal timeline for myself in that moment, but in that moment, seemed like it really sucks. And it seemed at that instant like I wasn't. See what I'm saying? So understand that the most optimal timeline at this moment might suck, but it's gonna harden you into a much more conscious, much more aware, much more skilled human, okay? So it's all dependent on how you view things. Remember, it's all perspective. It might suck, it might seem negative now, but that negativity you're facing in your life might be what is the most optimal timeline for you, okay? So use that co-creative consciousness. Always look at every single situation you're in a particular light that is going to make you grow, because the universe grows. That is one of nature's laws. We grow, okay? Nature grows life, it grows plants. We grow. Consciousness goes through levels of growth. First density, second density, third, fourth density, higher than that, right? So, negative or positive, I think we're always on that optimal timeline. It just depends on what you are choosing, how you are choosing to look at it.